The best man. Love is supposed to be simple. You meet someone, you fall in love, and if you're lucky, they feel the same way. But life isn't that easy. Not for me. Not when the man I've been in love with for years is about to marry someone else. I should have let go a long time ago. I should have moved on, buried these feelings where they couldn't hurt me. But when he asked me to be his best man, I couldn't say no. So now, I stand beside him, smiling through the pain, pretending to be happy for him. Pretending this isn't breaking me apart. But as the wedding draws closer, something shifts between us. A lingering glance. A touch that lasts too long. A moment that feels like something more. Maybe I was wrong all along. Maybe he's been hiding something too. Before we dive into this story of unspoken love, tension, and a choice that could change everything, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single moment. Now let's begin. The invitation arrived 3 months ago. A crisp white envelope, my name neatly written on the front in his handwriting. I almost didn't open it. I already knew what it was. Ethan and Sophia request the honor of your presence at their wedding. I stared at those words for a long time, my stomach twisting in knots. I had known this was coming. I had known from the moment he introduced her to me, the way he looked at her, the way she fit so seamlessly into his life, into the life I had always been a part of. But knowing it didn't make it easier. I should have RSVP'd with a polite decline. I should have come up with an excuse, work, travel, anything. Instead, I found myself standing in front of him days later, trying to act normal as he grinned and clapped a hand on my shoulder. "You're my best man, right?" I froze. I was supposed to be his best man, the one standing next to him as he promised forever to someone else, the one giving a toast about their love, the one smiling through the pain, pretending this wasn't destroying me, and like a fool, I said yes. Now, as I stand in his apartment, watching him try on his tux for the fitting, I wonder how much longer I can keep up this act. Ethan stands in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Do I look like a guy about to get married?" he asks, turning to me with a smirk. I swallow hard. Yes, and it's killing me. "You look great," I manage, forcing a smile. He grins, running a hand through his hair. I still can't believe it's happening. Feels like just yesterday we were sneaking beers at college parties and swearing we'd never settle down. I chuckle, but it's hollow. Yeah, time flies. His eyes meet mine in the mirror, and for a second, something flickers there, something unreadable. But then it's gone, replaced by that easy confidence he's always had. "Hey, thanks again for doing this," he says, turning to me. "I mean it. I can't imagine anyone else standing up there with me." I nod, gripping the edge of the couch so hard my knuckles turn white. I can imagine someone else. I can imagine me standing up there, but not as his best man, as the one he's marrying. The thought is reckless, painful, impossible. But I can't stop it. Sophia walks in then, her laughter filling the room as she wraps her arms around him. He kisses her forehead and I look away, swallowing the ache in my throat. "How do you think he looks?" Ethan asks her. She smiles at him, then at me. "Like the luckiest guy in the world." I should be happy for him. Instead, I feel like I'm drowning. That night, I can't sleep. I lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the day. The way he looked at me in the mirror. The way his hand lingered on my shoulder when he thanked me. The way I felt when he kissed her. It's suffocating.
I throw the blankets off and grab my phone, hesitating before typing out a message. Me. Can we grab a drink? A few minutes pass, then my screen lights up. Ethan. Thought you'd never ask. The bar is quiet, dimly lit, the kind of place we used to escape to in college when we needed to talk. Or not talk, just be. He slides onto the stool next to me, ordering 2 whiskeys without asking. Figured you'd need something strong. I chuckle, shaking my head. You know me too well. Of course I do, he says easily. You're my best friend. The words hit harder than they should. We sit in comfortable silence for a while, sipping our drinks, watching the ice melt. Then, out of nowhere, Ethan sighs. Do you ever think about what would have happened if life had been different? I freeze, my glass halfway to my lips. What do you mean? He swirls the whiskey in his glass, avoiding my gaze. I mean, if we had made different choices, if things had gone another way. My heart is pounding so loudly I can barely hear myself speak. What are you saying, Ethan? He finally looks at me, his blue eyes clouded with something I can't read. I don't know, he admits. But sometimes I feel like I missed something. The air between us shifts. The bar feels smaller. The world outside fades. And for the first time in years, I wonder if I've been wrong about everything. Ethan's words hung between us, heavy and unspoken, like the weight of something neither of us had ever dared to acknowledge. Sometimes I feel like I missed something. I stared at him, my heart slamming against my ribs. I should have laughed it off. I should have shrugged and changed the subject. But I didn't, because for the first time I saw hesitation in his eyes, a crack in his certainty, a flicker of doubt. I took a slow sip of my whiskey, trying to steady my voice. What do you mean by that? Ethan exhaled, shaking his head slightly. I don't know. Just, do you ever think about how different things could have been? Every damn day. I forced a smirk. What, like if you hadn't proposed to Sophia? He let out a small laugh, but there wasn't humor in it. Not just that. He glanced down at his glass, fingers tightening around it. I mean, if we had... He stopped. My breath caught. If we had... What? For a moment, I thought he was going to say it. That maybe, just maybe, all these years, all these moments, it wasn't just me. But then he shook his head again, draining the last of his drink. Never mind. I'm just talking nonsense. Coward. The thought came out of nowhere, bitter and sharp. I had spent years convincing myself that Ethan never saw me that way, that my feelings were one-sided, that he was just too straight, too oblivious, too unavailable. But now I wasn't so sure. I could push him, make him say what he was really thinking, or I could let it go, pretend this conversation never happened, and watch him walk down the aisle with her. I cleared my throat. Ethan, if there's something you want to say. His phone buzzed on the table. Sophia. He picked it up, glanced at the screen, then sighed. I should get back. And just like that, the moment was gone. He threw some cash on the bar and stood, running a hand through his hair. Thanks for the drink, man. And for everything. Then he was gone. And I was left sitting there, staring at my half-empty glass, wondering if I had just let the most important moment of my life slip through my fingers. The night air was cool when I stepped outside. I should have gone home, should have crawled into bed and tried to sleep off the ache in my chest. But my feet had a different idea. Before I could stop myself, I was walking toward his place. His apartment wasn't far, just a few blocks from the bar. The lights were still on when I got there, and through the window I saw him pacing, phone in hand.
Sophia was probably checking in, making sure he was okay, making sure I hadn't ruined him. I could have left. Should have. But I didn't. Instead, I knocked. A few seconds later, the door opened. Ethan blinked at me, surprised. "Mateo?" I swallowed. "I needed to know." His brows furrowed. "Know what?" I stepped inside, heart racing. "Back at the bar, when you said you missed something." I forced myself to meet his eyes. "Were you talking about me?" Silence. A long, unbearable silence. And then he sighed. He closed the door behind us, leaned against it like the weight of the conversation was too much to bear. "Mateo," he ran a hand down his face. "Why are you asking me this now?" "Because you never say things like that. Because for the first time in my life, I think maybe I wasn't imagining it." My voice shook, but I pushed forward. "And because I can't stand next to you on your wedding day wondering if we were supposed to be something more." His breath hitched. For the first time, Ethan looked scared. Not because of the wedding, not because of Sophia, because of me. Because maybe deep down he knew the truth too. He took a step toward me, then another. Too close. Too warm. Too much. "I don't know," he whispered. "I don't know what this is. I don't know what I'm feeling." "But you're feeling something." He didn't deny it. I swallowed hard, my pulse hammering in my ears. "If I walk away right now, if I never bring this up again, will you marry her and never think about this moment?" A war waged in his eyes. His chest rose and fell too fast. Then he did the worst possible thing. He didn't answer. He just reached for me. A desperate, reckless touch, fingers curling around my wrist like he needed something to hold on to, like he was drowning. And I knew then, with absolute certainty, that I was right. It was never just me. Ethan's fingers curled around my wrist, warm and desperate, like he was holding on to something he wasn't ready to let go of. Like he was holding on to me. I couldn't move. Wouldn't move. If I did, this moment would shatter, and we'd be left with nothing but regrets and silence. His grip tightened for a fraction of a second. Hesitation, uncertainty, before he let go like he had just realized what he was doing. He took a shaky step back, running a hand through his hair, his jaw clenched so tightly I thought he might break. "Mateo," he started, but he didn't finish. Because what could he say? That this was a mistake? That he didn't mean it? That he wasn't thinking straight? I would have accepted any of those excuses. But he didn't give me one. Instead, he looked at me with something I couldn't name. Something raw and unguarded. Something that made my chest ache because I recognized it. Want. Fear. A war between them. "You shouldn't be here," he said finally, his voice hoarse. I should have nodded. Agreed. Walked away. Instead, I said the one thing that had been burning inside me for years. "But you want me to be." Ethan inhaled sharply, his whole body tensing. Then he laughed. A bitter, broken sound. He turned away, pacing the length of the small living room, his hands on his hips like he was trying to hold himself together. "This isn't..." He stopped, shaking his head. "I don't know what the hell this is." I swallowed, my throat dry. "Then tell me the truth." He stopped pacing. His eyes met mine. "What if I don't know how?" My stomach twisted. I should have been angry. I should have told him that he didn't get to do this. Not now. Not when he had spent years pretending there was nothing between us. But I wasn't angry, because the truth was, I'd always been waiting for him to catch up. I stepped closer. "Then let me make it easy for you." I reached out, hesitating for just a moment before my fingers brushed against his. A test. A dare. a line we had never crossed. And then he moved, not away, toward me. His hand gripped mine, tight, like he was afraid of what would happen if he let go. His chest rose and fell too fast, his pulse pounding beneath my fingertips. I could feel the moment he gave in, the second he stopped fighting it. He was the one who closed the distance. His breath was warm against my skin, his lips hovering just inches from mine. So close I could feel everything. His hesitation, his hunger, his fear. Then, finally, he kissed me. It wasn't soft. It wasn't hesitant. It was reckless. Like years of silence had built up inside him, and he didn't know how to hold it in anymore. Like he had wanted this just as badly as I had. His hands cupped my face, his body pressing against mine, and I melted into him, gripping his shirt, pulling him closer, not caring about anything except this. Except him. We crashed against the wall, his mouth trailing from my lips to my jaw, his breath uneven as he whispered my name like it was something he had never allowed himself to say this way before. Matteo. I didn't realize I was shaking until his hands slid to my waist, steadying me. Or maybe he was the one who needed steadying. His forehead pressed against mine. I could feel the moment reality came crashing back. His grip loosened. His breathing slowed. And then, like he had been struck, he pulled away. I watched it happen, the regret settling in, the panic. Ethan stumbled back, his fingers brushing over his lips like he was trying to erase the last 5 minutes. Shit, he breathed. I didn't move. Don't. His eyes snapped to mine. Don't act like you didn't want that. A muscle in his jaw twitched. Matteo, He swallowed hard. I'm getting married. My chest tightened. I know. He shook his head, eyes wild. This can't happen. It already did. I saw the war inside him, the guilt, the confusion, the longing still lingering in his gaze. And then, without another word, he walked away. The door closed between us, and for the first time since I had met him, I knew I had lost him. Or maybe he had lost me. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I felt his hands on me, his lips, the weight of his body pressing against mine like he was afraid I'd disappear if he let go. And then, just as suddenly as it happened, he did let go. He walked away, shut the door, left me standing there like I was nothing but a mistake he wished he could erase. I told myself it was over, that I should let it go, pretend it never happened, just like he wanted me to. But how do you pretend something didn't happen when you can still feel it? The wedding was a week away. The island was buzzing with last-minute preparations. Sophia sent me pictures of the decorations, asking my opinion on centerpieces and table settings, oblivious to the fact that her fiancé had kissed me 2 nights ago. Ethan and I hadn't spoken since. Not a word. I had expected him to call, to text, to say something, but he didn't. And maybe that should have been my answer. Maybe it was. 3 nights before the wedding, I found myself outside his apartment again. I told myself I was just walking, that it was just habit, that I wasn't really hoping to see him. But then I looked up, and there he was, sitting on his balcony, a drink in his hand, staring out at the city like he was somewhere else entirely, like he was lost. He hadn't noticed me yet. I could have walked away, should have. Instead, I called his name. He startled, his head snapping toward me. For a second, neither of us moved. Then he sighed and stood up, disappearing inside.
A moment later, the front door opened. "Mateo." His voice was tired. I forced a smirk. "Figured you were avoiding me." His lips pressed into a thin line. Maybe I was. Honest, I hated that. I crossed my arms. "Are we going to talk about it, or are you just going to pretend it didn't happen?" His jaw tightened. "I don't know what you want me to say." I laughed, but it wasn't funny. "I don't know, Ethan. Maybe that you felt something? That you've been feeling something for years, but you were too much of a coward to admit it?" His eyes darkened. "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" I stepped forward. "Tell me, Ethan. Tell me I was wrong. Tell me I imagined it. Tell me you kissed me, and it didn't mean anything." Silence. His fingers curled into fists at his sides. His breathing was uneven. I wanted him to fight me. I wanted him to deny it. But he didn't. He just stood there, looking at me like he wished he could turn back time. I exhaled, shaking my head. "You love her?" "Yes." His voice was firm, immediate, but there was something off about it, something missing. I swallowed. "But do you love me?" A sharp breath. His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed. Seconds stretched into eternity. Then, so quietly I almost didn't hear it, he whispered, "I don't know." My stomach dropped. Not no. Not I'm sorry. Just uncertainty. And that was worse. I let out a shaky laugh. "That's not good enough, Ethan." He ran a hand through his hair, looking away. "I know." I should have walked away then. I should have spared myself the pain of what came next. But instead I stepped closer, voice raw. "Then tell me what happens now." His eyes met mine, and I saw the answer before he even spoke. "I'm marrying her." The final blow. I nodded slowly, forcing myself to breathe. "Then that's it?" He hesitated just for a second, then, "Yeah, that's it." I stared at him, waiting for something, anything. A confession, a plea, a reason to fight for him. But he gave me nothing, just silence. A hollow, empty silence that told me this was over before it ever had the chance to begin. I took a step back, my throat tight. "Congratulations, Ethan." And then I turned and walked away. This time I was the one leaving. The wedding day arrived, bright and perfect. The kind of day people dream about. I stood beside Ethan at the altar, dressed in a suit that felt like a prison. The room was filled with laughter, love, and lies. I was his best man. Nothing more. Never more. When it was time for my speech, I raised my glass, forcing a smile. "I've known Ethan for years," I started, my voice steady, betraying nothing. "And if there's one thing I can say for certain, it's that he always follows his heart." A pause. A flicker of something in his eyes. I swallowed hard. "And today, he's chosen the person he wants to spend forever with." Sophia beamed. Ethan held his breath. And I couldn't be happier for him. A lie. The room erupted in applause. Ethan exhaled, looking at me like he wanted to say something, but it was too late. The choice had been made. I sat down, my hands trembling under the table. This was the ending I never wanted. The reception was a blur of music and champagne. I watched him dance with her, watched his hands rest on her waist the way they had rested on me. I waited for regret to hit him, for him to stop, to look at me, to realize. He never did. So I did the only thing I could. I left, out into the cool night, away from the lights and the laughter and the life that was never mine to have. I walked until I reached the place where it all started, the bar where he had first let doubt slip into his voice. I sat down, ordered whiskey,
and when the bartender asked if I was waiting for someone, I smiled bitterly. "No," I said. "Not anymore." Some love stories don't have happy endings. Some leave us with questions, regrets, and the ache of what-ifs. What would you have done in Mateo's place? Would you have fought for Ethan? Or was walking away the only choice? Tell us in the comments. And if this story made you feel something, anything, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next unforgettable story. Because sometimes, the hardest thing isn't losing love, it's letting go.